Righty. Welcome.
All right. All right, guys. Welcome back to the Fitness and Philosophy Podcast. James, how are you doing today?
I am great. I'm hot, but I'm great.
I was going to mention to you that it was for the Pain and Fitness episode. We were playing like the Corn Freak on a Leash song, and then forgetting the name of the other one. Why is it? Your daughter found it. It was like a guitar riff.
Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah, Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah.
The all-knowing YouTube algorithm as I was uploading it. Thou shalt not upload this clip. So I was given three choices, which I'm sure eventually will apply to not just music that's copyrighted, but what we say on the show. But it was basically take this clip out, make it so it has no music, or like put on generic like music in the background. Which would have been incredible.
Music with a K. Oh yeah. Man, that's good. I also just to add to that, remember I made the comment that there's not a lot of good bass in that kind of like rock,
Yeah,
there is, but in another song that I'm not going to play it now, but No Doubt. Remember when No Doubt came on the scene?
I do.
And you guys can go and reference this song. It's called It's My Life.
Yeah.
Man, and just listen really closely to the bass in there. Now, I'm not going to say it's as aggressive as Red Hot Chili Peppers or Korn, but man, some good bass in there. And that guy was he was legit. He was legit good. What an interesting group too, right? Just fascinating at that time in the culture, right? Just her pizzazz and the kind of style they had and the kind of music they did. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I moved with my family to Orange County like 92, 93. And I think I'm Just a Girl was like 93, 94. And it was like ska. She was from Anaheim. Like, just that whole, I definitely
talk about popular for a period of time, right? Wow.
Yeah.
That was pop.
Yeah.
Good stuff. I like that scene though. I'm not even sure what you call that, like punk rock, pop punk rock kind of, move over. Green Day at the same time, right?
Yeah, Lit. I don't know if you ever heard of the band Lit, but they were kind of that. That same.
Yeah, I got a friend who lives down the street who I'm going to be eventually learning to do some stuff with them with my drumming practice. But they're going to be doing some Toto and Thin Lizzy for any older folks on here listening. At our pool, we're gonna have a community kind of get together, and this little band in the area going to get together and play some of those old songs. So,
awesome.
I'll say my number one request is going to be "Hold the Line" by Toto. That's going to be my first one. That's just dun 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 dun. And there's one older guy who sings with them that has a pretty, they could probably hit that vibe. So I'm pretty excited on that.
I had no idea this was even like a genre of music, but I knew that like collectively I liked these different songs before. But like I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I found out that there was a genre called yacht rock, which is literally, you've never heard of this?
How do you spell that?
So like it's a joke, like yacht, like YACHT, like yacht.
Okay.
It's like Kenny Loggins, Toto, Summer Breeze, like
I didn't know.
For the summer, like I mean, just in general, I mean, it's excellent music, but like I went back, it's like it's basically Hall & Oates, late 70s, early 80s soft rock.
I love that.
Oh yeah, I do too.
I got like, I guess quasi 3 different versions of stations on Pandora that are like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I could I won't do it, but I could make some serious attempts of like holding that key for all those songs. Yeah, I like that.
From Memorial Day to Labor Day, when I was like coaching classes each year, when I figured this out, like people at a certain point, people were like, "Oh, I put on something else," but like I would be turning it on.
And, Kenny Loggins is not doing it for me. 7 minutes of burpees.
Yeah, not doing the trick. I'm like, well,
you can't make those chords go up and down in that wind. Yeah.
But yeah, it's I mean, if you're looking for that that genre either on Pandora or Spotify, like I think on Spotify there's a playlist called Yacht Rock 2.0 that's excellent.
Okay.
It's a
Super.
public playlist.
Brought to you
By Yacht Rock 2.0. You get the cease and
well,
desist letter from
I
Spotify.
disagree with your sentiments on how well you think that time frame was for music. I completely disagree.
It's all year, really. I mean,
I disagree. All right, how are we going to tie in? How are we going to get to disagreement in fitness and actually have enough time to spend on the disagreements in fitness? I saw the list of stuff where, I mean, we could go, right? We can go on forever, but I think if you were to start us off with some of the ways for people to come into the idea around disagreement in that, and to use Toto's language, hold the line real tight for all the current, because all the current, I think the current cultural, the current cultural language used for disagreement is fairly important right now. So wow,
I
here we
completely
go.
agree.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say that given the episode, but I completely agree. So just a word on how like I envision this. As most of you guys know, we typically do these in couplets, but I think this one in particular will be similar to our dogmatism and skepticism series, where we actually did 2 on dogmatism and then did 1 on skepticism.
Yeah.
This one's a big one, so I think we're probably going to end up doing 2 on it. So you might even be wondering, like, why is disagreement even like a philosophical concept? Like, how is this even discussed in philosophy? Well, a lot of what philosophers do is they look at the world and say, here's this thing going on, so disagreement is just a fact. Take literally any endeavor that you would want, the Talmud, fitness, philosophy, art, like name it. There have been disagreements throughout all of history, and a lot of the questions here revolve around like, well, what do we do with that? What do we say about that? Why would it be that human beings with somewhat similar faculties, obviously not everyone has the same amount, but somewhat similar faculties, and looking at the exact same data would then come to different conclusions about that data?
Yeah.
So, and then there's also the value question. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this neutral? Is this baked into evolution? The same way there's genetic diversity, is disagreement a thing to keep us from like falling off the edge of a cliff idea wise, right? Or we would fall into some dystopian future where there's, maybe there's some of us that are just more inclined to disagree generally to kind of pull the culture back.
Yeah.
So just some famous examples from history, of really big questions. Like, it's not like, oh, chocolate or vanilla. And I mean, there are certainly things like that we disagree about, but what counts as moral and what doesn't. And these, by the way, are things we've discussed on these episodes, or a lot of them are. The role of government in society. Christians are currently 2.4 out of 7.5 billion people. If this is supposed to be the absolute truth, why is it that more than half the world does not believe this? And if you collectively count up all humans in history, more humans than not have not believed this. So what sense do we make of this? And this isn't just a problem for Christianity. This is a problem for any religion, right? Any religion, there's this question of not just why don't other people believe it if this is the truth, but why they're competing religions that make claims to entirely different truths.
Yeah. And therefore lies a quote unquote disagreement, because everyone can't agree on the same thing. So it's not 7.5 out of 7.5 billion people that all think the same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
How the world came to be, the existence of extraterrestrial life. That one's a bit easier to understand because it's kind of like, there's some data here, there's some data there. That one's a little bit easier to account for. The best way to live one's life, what happens after we die, how to raise children, whether to get married or not. So going back to our liberty discussion, this is at least one very strong argument in favor of the notion that in a modern, democratic, pluralistic society where everyone has a different conception of the good, it is better to err on the side of, generally speaking, one is allowed to pursue one's life as one chooses, legally speaking. Legally, we can then make different arguments about like optimal and whatnot beyond that, but legally, without interference from other people.
Yes. Yes. And that's disagreed upon as well, depending upon,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, I get it. I get you.
But like that fact right there, like it almost circles back on itself for people who like would then make that point, right? Like the fact of disagreement is like, well, what do we do here? You're gonna either beat people into believing what you believe, or we're gonna have to get along.
Yeah. There was always a classic. What were these individuals in society called? Were they just classic skeptics, I guess, that would propose that idea that, disagreement was the first thing they would come into with all civil discussion? Were they just called the skeptics, or?
That's a good question. I suppose maybe. I mean, I think a lot of this historically was born out of like, I mean, obviously there are different pockets of it in different times in the world, but like a lot of what we're talking about today comes from like the religious wars in Europe.
Yeah.
And this notion of, okay, Protestants.
Yeah. Yeah, we're right. No, we're right. No, we believe this. We believe this. Yeah.
And then like, how do we get on given that stuff without killing each other, essentially?
Yeah.
So another important issue is like, what are the causes of disagreement? It's certainly an easy thing to account for disagreement if we can just say, hey, you don't have the same information as I do, or vice versa. But it's harder when we both have the same experience or similar experience. So we could say things like lack of experience, lack of rationality, bias, dogmatism, logical fallacies, tendency to believe what family and friends believe with no good reason, all of which are interesting ones that I'm sure we'll touch on. But probably the main one that we've mentioned before that I wanted to mention today that's very interesting from a philosophical perspective is this notion of underdetermination. So if we just break that down into its component parts, what that means, determine just means to like set a fixed thing, and under means it's not enough to set a fixed thing. So here's a silly example. If I tell you there's fruit in the fridge, that underdetermines what type of fruit it is. So me having that knowledge lets me know, okay, it's an apple, an orange, watermelon, it's some type of fruit, and it excludes it being kale or lettuce, but I still don't know what fruit it is.
And you also don't know when it's best to eat that fruit, what time of year.
That's correct. If you're here in northern Indiana, there's really 2 months in which you could eat that fruit. July and August, and then the rest is just cabbage. But the super interesting thing here philosophically is take that same point I just made about the fruit and apply it to the world at large. The idea is the data we receive from experience, whether sensory or otherwise, is insufficient by itself to uniquely determine one way of interpreting it.
Yeah.
Which leads to the consequence that you could have two completely rational people seeing the exact same data and having the exact same experience and disagreeing with one another.
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. I think isn't it briefly just the answer to investigation and the scientific process that allows us to come to some agreement down the line of that? So is that the long-term fix for it? And it's just that there's so many different views, right? Or so many different perceptions with probably a lack of experience and understanding of those different views. And the only way I was just jumping ship to get to like, well, how do you overcome this disagreement? Isn't it like back and forth, conversation, trial and error, over and over and over, reproducible, and then, it's like, listen, like, for example, the fruit in the fridge, right? We went back and forth there, 19 times over the past 2 weeks, and it's been that fruit, right? So, so then to make the statement, there's this fruit in the fridge, we all have to agree upon that. And how many times does it take, is it 24 times needs to be reproduced before we say it's that fruit's in the fridge, right?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Here's some ways to think about it. When we talked about philosophy of science and truth, we talked about this notion. Some people, when they think about truth and scientific truth, truth is one. It's just there is one truth of the matter. Either there are aliens or there are not. Just, that's a fact. And if you're an adherent of that view, you could just say, well, epistemologically, like from a knowledge perspective, the reason why we disagree is we don't have enough information. But in principle, in the future, we could get enough information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or sometimes a similar one would be with like the pragmatists, where they say truth is just what remains at the end of inquiry, at the end of scientific inquiry.
Mhm.
What's super interesting about underdetermination is it's actually saying that the nature of any data we could get from the world is such that there's going to be this gap between what we receive and the theory we use to account for it, and which is going to lead to these slips or gaps in between different people having, quantum gravity or string theory or something like that. So we're not saying underdetermination is, the true account of the world necessarily, but it's an interesting thought to say, it's an interesting way of accounting for why there is rational disagreement. This idea that what you receive for the world may not be enough to uniquely pick out God or no God, or
Yeah.
scientific theory or that. So
Yeah, for sure. No, I can lend an ear to that. Of course, my brain always goes to, trying to go after the truth and trying to have a scientific process to get to that. But I agree with you. And your final point you made there is an interesting one of, lightning was assumed to be a godlike thing, 150 years ago or 200 years ago or 300 years ago. So how do we come to an agreement that lightning is not that? And we did after, let's just say lots of investigation and lots of, back and forth of this.
right.
So it can change with that over time. But yeah, to start with underdetermination, I like that. I also thought about too, to your point of, there's this particular, mention of something, right? And I don't know why I thought of this, but it may show us why it's challenging to have, or why it is present to have so much disagreement today, but also why it's challenging to come to these answers at the end. Is that there used to be, as an example, in the legacy media, Walter Cronkite, or in Canada it was Knowlton Nash, right? And these are just individuals who would, speak to society around what was happening, right? And they're trying to take that information that happens behind these closed doors and speak to people you can make a decision, but this is kind of what's going on right now, right? These are the talks that are going on between Cuba and America, and what I'm saying, and it's that. But now there's 19 different messages. So think about that in terms of oh my gosh, I could at least, maybe I could, it's coming from one source, and maybe that makes it so, so old school that it doesn't allow me to open my mind to a possible disagreement, right? It's just okay, that is what it is. But now there's so many. I'm trying to think of a way out of that, if it's actually possible in the future to come to an agreement, if there's 35 different versions of something that we can disagree upon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an incredibly important point, and I think there's a lot to be said philosophically about it. It's this idea of, you have to wonder, in the Walter Cronkite stuff, did the opinions did they exist? They just weren't getting the voice, right? So now what we have today is just, it's much easier for those things that probably existed. I doubt everyone was agreeing with Walter Cronkite back then, although I see and understand your point.
I was trying to use it as a voice, right? One voice.
Yeah, one voice.
Yeah.
And there is, with humans, there's that idea of the paradox of choice, right? When you're presented with too many options, you get overwhelmed. I think today what's troublesome about modernity, I personally, and I could be wrong, this is my own personal assessment of things, again, go look back at the Talmud or anything else, even within these groups. A lot of what's changed today in the modern world isn't that there's necessarily more or less disagreement, it's that we have exposure to far more things.
Mm-hmm.
We have exposure to far more different ways of thinking. People in the Middle East 2,000 years ago weren't necessarily exposed to Buddhism and Hinduism and all these, and Taoism and all these different thing. So now we have like all these different philosophies of living, all these different perspectives on what's going on, that have always existed
Mhm.
in one form or another, but now we need to do a lot more philosophical work to be like, why is my view better than that view, or how do I sustain what I believe in the face of that? So that's where I go with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're essentially saying the same thing. I just, the way I see it is just like, I'm just trying to think of all the people receiving all those points of information. It's just, it just makes it very cloudy. It's almost, and then I can see why people just throw in the towel. They're like, I don't want to spend the time of trying to learn about all those concepts of all those different opportunities, right? It's just like, and you know what that does, right? Through mediocrity, that creates this like endeavor towards just nothingness, perhaps, right? They're like, I just want to throw in the towel. I don't want to listen to all of it. I'm just going to choose what, works well for me. And we know how that gets people into trouble, right? What works well for you right now is just because that's your motivations and that's your perspective, but that doesn't make it good,
Right.
So I think we're saying the same thing there. And anyways, I guess I'm colored by that of seeing how much there is to get people to this point. Go back to what you said. How do we, in disagreement? I forget how you started, but experience is the word that I looked at as being like something that's really important, right? How much experience is needed for you to filter all of that? How much experience is needed for you actually to make the statement? Like, I disagree with that, yeah, there's so much in that.
Yeah, and I mean, there are benefits and drawbacks to each approach, right? Like if you're in the insular tribal model, it's a lot easier to make a decision, right? Because it's
Yeah,
all sort of pre-filtered for you.
yeah,
But then of course the drawback there is, not always, but in a lot of cases, heavy dogmatism. You will
yeah,
believe this, you will marry this person, this is the way you will raise your child. And a lot of what we have today is born out of a struggle against that. Now, of course, now we have this tremendous freedom,
yeah.
which has a lot of good to it. But then, of course, the drawback, like you were saying, which I totally agree is a tough one, is just this overwhelm
Hmm.
in the face of so many different things. And where does one even look for truth? And do we even bother with it when there's so many different competing versions?
Yeah. And how hard it is to make the right decision, right? It's hard work. It's not easy, right? It's hard to make to make that decision. And so let's just think about that in our world, in physical culture. How many people are resilient enough to handle a whole bunch of hard work, like 10 years of it? Yeah, something I think about a lot. It's hard to make hard decisions. It's a lot of energy to make difficult decisions. So
And that's why there is something to be said for the pre-filtered version, of your tribe
exactly,
and your, clan.
exactly.
And
It's easy. It's easy.
yeah,
Yeah, it works for me.
yeah.
We'll all agree to disagree. I know we're going there. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Well, I mean that brings us to one of the main philosophical things about disagreement is like, what are some options for dealing with it? And there are many options, but I'm just going to bring
Yeah,
it down to two main ones.
yeah, I
But
like this.
um, option one, just to keep it fairly easy to understand, different strokes for different folks, right? The pros here: less conflict, epistemological humility. We're all finite human beings. Let people be people. Cons, it seems to allow irrationality and dangerous positions to flourish, and objective truth takes a back seat. So with either one of these positions that we're talking about, option one or option two, like there is no all benefit and no drawback position. It doesn't exist. Okay.
Mhm.
So you have to kind of, stake your claim somewhere and, say, well, this has better benefits and this has fewer drawbacks. But the different strokes for different folks thing seems appealing on the face of it, and maybe it applies to certain things, like we'll get to with chocolate versus vanilla, or rock versus rap, or something like that. But it does have these downstream consequences where you get this almost arbitrariness and no objective truth. The flip side of that, there is option two. There is a fact of the matter, and people who don't recognize that are just wrong. Like just full stop. Like not sort of wrong or wrong for that time, but just wrong.
Wrong, period.
Yes. And the pros here are objective truth takes a front seat, and we can call irrational and dangerous positions what they are, and not hedge our bets and hem and haw and be like, well, for that culture in that time.
Yeah.
Cons, it can lead to more conflict and have a tendency towards dogmatism.
Yeah, this is where this goes back to our conversation, right? How I start to lend towards that over the past decade or so, in criticizing those bad ideas of what I truly believe is against the fundamental truth, right? In basic lifestyle guidelines and resistance and et cetera, depending upon how I presumed to be the highest order concept, right? For fitness, right? And physical expression, et cetera, and how that could be seen, to your point, as dogmatism, right? We discussed that, right? It kind of can work back against itself, for that. I I also remember Thomas Sowell's, I think it's Sowell, his words on those areas and those challenging topics. Two things to consider. Number one, go into it recognizing there's always trade-offs. There's always trade-offs. Like you're never going to come, so if you first understand that going into it, then I think you have a better, let's call it, artillery to work with all those challenges that are going to come in front of you, right? And then secondly, I think maybe you could speak to it a little bit more, where you're saying, it does come down to the context of the topic, because I think to the extremes of what we're discussing in disagreement, right? Like back to the chocolate vanilla versus like, do these moral fundamental truths exist, and where should we go on it, right? And follow the golden rule, or, are we over here, at what we believe? I think, would you agree with that it does have to do with the intensity of the actual particular topic that does make and then think about that. There's no like, scalar definition of intensity for those things, right? Because it's all in the eye of the beholder as to what's important. I'm sure there's some people, there's no tribes, but sure some people, chocolate or vanilla gets you in the, now listen, I was talking about ice cream here, so if you're, I'm sure there's some tribes that are like, it's like the Twix commercials. They're so good. So good. Anyways, sort of bring that through, but any thoughts on that for the...
No, it's a great point. So I think there are a couple ways to look at it. So in terms of the intensity of debate need not necessarily reflect the kind of disagreement that is taking place. So when we talk about different kinds of disagreement, there are things that we sometimes in philosophy refer to as matters of taste.
Mm-hmm.
So those just in kind, whether they are intense disagreements or not, are just things that, subjectively, you like that and you like that, and who knows why. Genetics, family, part of the world. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this. We're both kind of into food. I remember reading this interesting article about like the extent to which a native born person of a particular like country likes, what seems like a disgusting fermented food from that place. Like, you can really tell the person, like, what's
Vegemite.
The Vegemite, or what's the is it natto, the one that's super high in vitamin K2?
Yeah.
And most people think it's just like gross.
Yeah.
So a lot of these come down to culture and what you were raised in, what you were exposed to early. Now, there is one that seems to be a matter of taste that is, in fact, a matter of objective fact. It is sets versus reps, not reps versus... No, I'm just kidding. There are some people out there, I don't know why, they think it's reps first and then sets, but... So...
They're doing a world of good with the forums.
Brandon and I always joke about we should have an episode just dedicated to that, sets versus reps or reps versus sets. But I mean, those are perfect examples, right? Sets versus reps versus sets, the metric system versus, standard American measurements. These are all just different ways of doing the same thing. Yes, some are more than efficient than others, but really matters of taste. But when we get to matters of fact, and going back to your point about like, how do we how do we distinguish in kind between these different types of things? Is it the intensity of the disagreement, or is it the nature of what we're discussing? When we're talking about matters of fact, like whether a vaccine is effective or not, or whether evolution is true, or whether we should have certain laws regarding drinking and driving. Here we can't just say, oh, tomato, tomato, you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe. Like, we have to get on with the world. And this is the fundamental tension of a modern democratic pluralistic society. On the one hand, you do have to say something like, we have different fundamental conceptions of the good and you are allowed to live your life the way you want. ... There are questions. If a Jehovah's Witness says that their child cannot receive a blood transfusion, whoa, okay, well, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
then we run into principles of harm versus different conceptions of the good. So we have to be able to objectively say something in order to get on in the world, but we have to allow enough leeway for people to pursue what they want, so long as they are not harming others. And it comes to a head with like, what is harm?
Yeah. And yeah, it comes back to what you had mentioned of that middle zone of, not doing harm, doing good for most, and allowing someone to do what they wish to do, but not causing any issues to others.
Right.
Yeah. And this, I think we're getting there, but that's why being in that, or actually you also mentioned that, depending upon just be aware of the culture and the society and geography, right? Be aware where you are and just ask those questions, right? We may take for granted, we don't even know that we have the ability to challenge those notions, and because in some places people don't, right? And so I just want to make mention of that I am aware of the fact that it's not always freely available, the concept of what we're just talking about, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that's a big and tough one too, both in relation to space and with relation to time, right? So take a space example. Most of us would think, well, it's wrong for Saudi women not to be allowed to drive. Like, that is objectively wrong. It's not just, okay, well, culture and time and place and language is like, that is not correct. That is a restriction of freedom. And then there are discussions today that I'm sure people have been seeing around, Aristotle and what did these people think about? I mean, name a philosopher and they had some not great views about, different people, and does that negate everything they once thought? I mean, all these different things. And like, what do we say? Do we index it to the time? Do we not index to the time? So it's this interesting question about like, over what span of space and time does disagreement take place?
Yeah. I just listened to a number of people. I guess I'm always fascinated by not necessarily the context of what people will disagree upon, but on which the rock that person will stand. Yeah. That's what I'm always interested in. I don't know why. You got any thoughts as to why I may really enjoy that? I don't know why. Just like like you hear the person say, this is the cross I'm willing to burn on, right? This is the one that I'm picking. I'll say things like, this is the stake that I'm placing in the ground, right? I'll say, this is where I've laid my stake, right? We said like OPEX gyms do this. We will not do group classes, right? We do this, we do individual design, right? That's the stake we're placing inside, right? Anyways, I just want to make mention of that I'm always interested in not necessarily in what this is, the back and forth. You can't see me if it's on video, but my hands are going back and forth. Instead, it's like, I like seeing, the position that's taken, and what gets them to that point, and what's their motivations of that position, and how hard have they worked to create that position, or does their position have some, in my opinion, does it have some truth to it? I listen to I do it at least once a year, I think, but William Lane Craig versus Christopher Hitchens on Does God Exist? It's a classic 2009 debate. Just so much beauty in all of it, the whole orchestrating of it is just so much beauty and easily available. Anyways, and I look at that and I come in with a lens of like, I listen very carefully, right? Like I remember William Lane Craig's 5 points, right? Of argument for Christian theism as being the world, structure, you know. And I like seeing, like, isn't that interesting? That's the lane that he'll take, and that's the one that he's like really, really strong on. Anyways, I just want to make that point that I really like that position.
Yeah.
I guess classic philosophy, just like asking the questions as to why people are in that position,
Yeah, I mean, it's almost that Archimedean point of like what defines that person. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that thing that is kind of their when you see someone who you don't know, but maybe you don't know personally or very well, but like you respect them, and it's like this is
Yeah.
the stake I'm willing to die on. Like
Yeah. That's their fire. That's
yeah.
their,
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. Yeah. Thanks. I think it's like, that inspires me. It's like, they're showing, they're getting behind something 100% with purpose and like, and strength. I guess it's conviction wrapped in that too,
Yeah.
And that's cool. I think that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty neat. I think it's pretty neat that animals can do that, take that position and like really, really work hard on that. And I also gonna offer something for those out there who don't see it that way too, who may be questioning like, well, is that possibly a way through? I would say that has helped me grow. I'm not sure if it's going to help other people, but that has helped me grow to see a bunch of different versions of belief, right? And a bunch of different perspectives, increased empathy, right? It has increased my attention to seeing that. It allows quote unquote topics to not have this deep pain inside of them right from the get-go. Because now I can see it in a whole different light, because I've taken on that lens of like, well, I'm just really interested in where your position comes from and the kind of work that you're willing to do to like, right, really work through that, So anyways, that may help some people who may not even see that they're like dogmatic with a particular position and not willing to give it a bit of work,
Yeah, there are two things I think of there. I mean, I think I've mentioned this before, but like one of the reasons I really enjoyed being at the Notre Dame philosophy department is because there were a whole lot of people who disagreed with, what I believe, but in a principled way, in a way that wasn't just merely reactive and, well, my parents said so, and good reasons, and it led to very good discussions, some of which changed my beliefs, some of which didn't, but just going through that iron sharpens iron. You know what I mean? Like going through that fire of belief. And another thing I just thought of that what you were saying made me think of that I didn't think of when I was typing up the outline is not saying that this is the best or the only form of jurisprudence, but the American legal system is built on this adversarial thing. Mm-hmm. It's built on this idea that actually, like, maybe you'll better get at the truth if you have two people strongly arguing and disagreeing for one side versus the other, which is a very interesting concept.
Yeah.
So maybe that, to your point of maybe you see some truths in these battles back and forth or these disagreements, maybe you see something within that you couldn't see otherwise.
Yeah. It does make me appreciate, regardless of anyone's view on it, of the gratitude I have around being in the United States, a really interesting project, right, of democracy with multiple different forms of individuals, and the understanding of that. Also at a time today where the us and them, the right, the left, the liberal, conservative, and it's really hard to see what you just mentioned, the strength in that, the strength in each taking a side and coming to this, like, coming to this answer, I think there's a lot of, it's just tough to see it today. It's tough to see the beauty inside of that, yeah.
And a lot of its success depends on, and this is where a lot of the debate goes, especially today, on like good faith efforts on both sides,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And that really is a key ingredient where like it works really well. There's good faith.
It's where Machiavellian concepts come up and where politics and decisions have to be defined, right? What is politics and what is the intention based upon, each of these individuals? But yeah, in my opinion, anyways, there's lots of guardrails. It's just hard to step outside and look around and see that that's in place, that offers that.
Yeah.
Anyways, sorry that could go. I apologize.
No, you're fine. Two other minor things, and then we'll launch into the fitness and disagreement side of things. So I guess, yeah, three little mini things. So item number one, there's a difference between belief disagreement and action disagreement. So all that means is when we're talking about beliefs, you can either believe, disbelieve, or suspend judgment on something. Whereas with regard to actions, there's do it or don't do it. So when we talk about those disagreements, there are different types of options. Number two is disagreement is a matter of degrees, not always binary. And this is important. It's not just, well, someone believes in God and another person doesn't, or one person believes in socialism and the other person doesn't. It can be two, different degrees, and that can be a source of disagreement. If someone thinks this is 50% right and 60% right, so it doesn't need to be wholehearted. And then the last one that I think will be particularly relevant for what we're discussing with fitness is disagreement a matter of quantity or quality, meaning is it, again, to use the Christianity example, there are 2.5 billion people who refer to themselves as Christians today. That is out of 7.5 billion people. So it is the minority by a long shot. Does that affect its truth or not? Is it that, is it just a scale? Oh, 7.5 billion people don't and 2.5 billion do? Or as we'll talk about, in the case of fitness, but also in science, well, the flip side of that is the maybe quality of people isn't the right term there. Gets kind of hairy when you use that term, but I don't care if 10 million people don't think evolution is true or the entire world does. You know what I mean? Like, are we talking about among evolutionary biologists, right? So this question of when we get to fitness, is it among experienced 20-year fitness coaches, or is it, just among the fitness population at large?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So in terms of disagreement and fitness, did you have anywhere you wanted to start? Did you want to start with any particular disagreements or the nature of disagreement or anything you want to start off on?
No, I was thinking as we were kind of going through the notes prior to it is that the list is long. Like but I keep thinking that the one that creates the list, has to give a pretty good explanation, a lengthy explanation as to why that disagreement occurs. I also think about why are there disagreements? Because it goes back to the thoughts on people being born with this opportunity to be physically free and just do physical expression, right, for a lifetime, and then taking the idea of constructing this play, right, of like constructed ways of doing physical expression that doesn't have an underbelly of intentions, right, around long-term progression, is that then what are we disagreeing upon? Are we disagreeing upon just that one big whole hairy thing, or are we disagreeing upon a whole bunch of things that are just for enjoyment of disagreement? You know what I'm saying? So, and then I also think about maybe, I don't know how to language this, Robbie, but in my mind, some of the disagreements actually make no sense. That's just my opinion, because they come from a place where we're not backing up to discuss, the experience of the person discussing it. What is this whole concept of fitness? Where does this fit into society? You know what I'm saying? And I always walk back there because I just find so much. I just don't find a lot in the disagreements around like millimeters of beta ultrasonography gains in hypertrophy for trained individuals over 10 weeks. I'm like, man, I don't even know why I want to start the disagreement on that. And why is that, James? Maybe we shouldn't get bigger. It's like, it's just, well, where do you want to go with it? So that's where there's a lot there. Not sure if that helps us start anywhere, but.
No, I mean, that's okay. I mean, those are all good points. I mean, two things I thought of, one, I think this happened, a couple months ago, we were talking about, volume versus intensity.
Yeah.
There's some people out there who have been in the fitness game a long period of time. I think we were talking about you and Spieler potentially going on Rogan and, kind of having this discussion of intensity versus volume. And to me, that's one example of this more general, super interesting philosophical question, particularly as it relates to fitness. In the ideal scenario, would either coaches and or just fitness individuals after 20 years of experience come to an agreement about the basics?
Yeah.
Give them sufficient experience, give them sufficient exposure to different modalities. Is it the case that they're all broadly going to agree just on principles? Are they going to agree on the details? Like, what are your thoughts on what that would look like?
Yeah, I think it would, but I think that the experimentation of all the modalities is young. We're very young, and we're in the infancy stage of this this folly of exercise and participation, right? It seems like we've got enough years and enough data to go on, and things are moving quickly, so the data points are there and we can just extract it and read it. I don't think so. So I do think that I'll just take an idea, maybe 2060, and before I even enter into that, I know it'll be really weird, but maybe in 2060, there'll be enough that have gone through that, like, multiple generations of just horse shit around, honestly, what is exercise prescription and how to do it, and all the academia that, needs to be super secretly held for a certain amount of people to kind of, expose it to an audience of people who can't even express it. Until we get to the point where there'll be a number of people who might just stand up and say, I think this is what it is. I think this is the truth. We went through that practice, right? And we did that experiment. And to my point, the ones that I use is the concept of, these two markers, which are not even side fitness, but you got to consistently look at, because culture might be upstream from fitness for this particular point. Is obesity is not going down unbelievably with the increase in technology and et cetera, right? And then secondarily, this concept that I have are in terms of human resilience. And there's a whole bunch of things that I could say that indicate that overall humans are not more resilient over time. So those two things are pointing towards us hopefully getting to an agreement at 2060, which is in 39 years, where we say, yes, these beliefs in the fundamental truths, because it's going to need a lot of repetition. It's going to need a lot of repetition, a lot of play. And if leg presses were invented in 1835, and globo gyms, with like wood benches and lifting jugs, with reps and sets, not sets and reps, before 1900, then I think I may have a better answer for you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So in other words, when we go back to that idea of like causes or sources of disagreement, you're saying relative to fitness specifically, as opposed to say philosophy or religion, where over time there's only been increased diversity of thought and disagreement and things like that. With fitness, the reason why there's a lot of disagreement today is just because it's really in its infancy, and if it had had more time to mature and
the practice of it, and the I think the intentions of it, right? Like, to be very reductionist, it's only pertinent for the 20 to 30-year-old, in the language, and like, what are you doing and how you doing it, and what's this and how's this and who teaches it, and who sharing information and back and forth. And then for, not because you see a lot of 40-year-olds around your facility, but from 40 years up, it's just like, you know what I'm saying? So it just needs it just needs a longer time period before I think we'll be able to say things like that. And I could use other things like, how many of me's are around, right? How many late 40 individuals who've been quote unquote coaching in some way, shape, or form, either individuals or other coaches, for over 27 years, right? Not a lot. Not a lot. So the question has to be asked, what happened to those 10,000 other me's, right? And reason why that's an important thing to think about is like, well, how are we going to come to a conclusion on an agreement of what is best for the long-term process of a coach and a client? Well, there's not a lot of people to talk about it. Why? Because in my opinion, it's just chaos. It's just duct taping and trying to figure out how to do this thing. And then there's odd people like us who will speak out and go, maybe just this might be effective for folks. And it's like, you know, it's tough. So it's a disagreement on 12 other voices. Why? Because, and there's this one voice who quite possibly may be speaking the truth, but there's like 12 other voices, right? That's like, no, there's no way. And those 12 other voices are inexperienced, right? Low in competency and unconscious to the fitness intentions. So there's 12 disagreeing points. There's one agreeing point. That's why I bring up the concept of like time is going to dictate these truth, because I'm hoping that I'm talking about things with coaches of like you know, a career like 35 years as being like, and creating decade programs for people, right? Like, you know, you want people to exercise for a long period of time, right? So set them up for these big audacious lifetime goals of consistency, right? So that's what I'm hoping to do, so that in 2060 my the thoughts come true, right? That there's enough people around who stood the test of time, who were really involved in it, and we could all then agree that chewing your food and absolute strength training and easy aerobic work is going to get us the most defense against the zombies,
who will probably have attacked by then. And if not,
I bet you
that will steal the deal.
You know what would just kill me is that if I discover 39 years, I'll be 86. Yeah, I might be able to stay connected at that point in time and walk around. I'm not sure. Anyways, is how about if zombies have this capability? This was actually a nightmare of mine, that they had this capability of you know, you had to be really good at lactate in order to defend the zombie. So those who were really strong and great at aerobic activity couldn't handle it, but those who were like doing crazy intense fitness all survived.
James' consummate nightmare.
That's my nightmare.
Only the people who do pain survive.
That'll be a big you know, haha moment for me. No legacy after that one. If I'm 86 and I'm like, see, and then all of a sudden they come on as like the whole, you wrote this way back, and those are a really bad prediction.
And it's a zombie saying that. It's not a human. It's like a zombie's like, hey,
basically,
you know what?
Basically it's like pointing at an opexfit.com article.
Oh man.
Or listening to this podcast, right? I should have extended it out though, so maybe it's 2099 before we come to an agreement.
I kind of wish maybe at some point for one of these, I'll have Brandon see if he can digitally edit in some zombies like coming through the door, or like
over here.
Get you and
over here.
Like, it's happening, James. It's happening.
4 minutes. They're still with me.
My energy's gone.
Oh man.
So I guess on that point with the 2060 or the 2099, that kind of goes back to our question of like quantity of disagreement versus quality in terms of the people. So when you say, you know, let's say it's 2060 or 2099 or whatever year it is, this philosophical question about disagreement, who is the we we're talking about? Is that experienced coaches that are now agreeing? Is that fitness individuals? Is that the collective? Like, what are you quantifying over when you say that?
Yeah. I was thinking right away of a collective agreement of the physical expression experience, all agreeing upon this is what it could look like to do the best for all of us.
So it's not just let's say,
Not-
coaches who had 20 to 30-year experience.
Yeah, not just that. It's just that at that point in time, we would have, as I said on the back end, I would hope that there's a whole bunch of coaches with 30 years of experience to have conversation with their clients, and their clients are going, yeah, we know, we went through this, we put my kids through it. Now this is where I am, and yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm also thinking about the child that's born in a couple of years, right? They're born in 2027. And they then have 33 years, right? Where in 2034, they are inside an educational institution where it says, like, self-care is really important, right? And this is what the OPEC's principles are.
Call to prayer. It's coming. Okay, so there would be, so the idea is that in 2060 or 2099 or whatever year we're talking about, overall general agreement among a decent number of people about the general principles of fitness. Now, a caveat there that we have to mention for anything that, I don't know that we can say a specific threshold, but take anything that people broadly agree on, evolution, there's still an incredibly large subset of the population that does not. So
Yeah.
we would just need to say something like, this is very hand wavy, but among the relevant set of people, or something to that effect.
Yeah, for
right?
sure. Yeah. But I have hope in that for information and like how that gets out, and people yeah, you can read Steven Pinker's book on that, about just the concept of some of the points that he just picks on for like this progress of whatever, right? So those things can occur, right? It just takes time, and but I do agree on your point that and maybe it'll come at a time where we just start recognizing that it quote unquote has to be a focus. It's just well accepted that it has to be a focus. Therefore, there's more investigation over the next 30 years as opposed to like experimentation, because I think that's what's happening. We're experimenting and playing, and at that point in time, I think there'll be better explanations for what that process is. Like, in my opinion, I've said this multiple times, I think there's been million stories already written and millions of lives already lived as to what that physical expression should be. And I think that's fairly general, in my opinion. Like, it's a general synopsis. And it doesn't all look the same, right? Like, as I said multiple times, we forget the farmer, right? The physicality, and people are like, oh, they didn't work out. It's just the language of it. They did physical expression like all the time, so I'm classifying all of those examples in one for that, right?
One thing I'm curious about, and you don't need to name names, or maybe we could talk about ideas if they're here, but obviously both you and I agree that there's a lot of disagreements within fitness that are mistaken or misguided or based on faulty principles and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any principled disagreements in fitness that you can think of that we still haven't resolved? Or is there anyone, again, you don't need to name names if you don't want to, but
yeah,
like, James, you believe this set of things. Are there other folks who've been out there? I know a bunch of them have dropped off, but there are also a bunch who have not, who, think differently, who have different perspectives on things, where you think, oh, with relation to that topic, whatever that topic may be, that's still something we need to resolve, or we're still figuring out, or you've learned something through the disagreement. And any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's almost the same answer to the question of when will we come to a disagreement? So I think almost everything is still under disagreement. So all topics are, because we haven't, because I think it's gonna be a super long period of time to get to a point, to your example, like 12% of people agree in this, and it'll be 2060 when 85% of people agree. I'm seeing it, so all topics, we haven't come to a resolution on that. because of, as I said, we're in a massive chaotic experimentation phase. And, it seems like we've come to an agreement, right? But let's, let me just say something that it's only my perception. I think we've come to an agreement on that, physical activity results in some kind of acute dose response of metabolism. Right? I think we've come to that. But just think about that. Like, it's like, oh, big, but I think we've come to that agreement, right? So what is in disagreement? Sneakily enough, even that is in some circles is under disagreement. I won't go there, but it's almost a flat earth conversation in my opinion. But so everything else really is that. And I'm sorry if if that lands like grossly, depending upon what you wanted it to be for the question, but I think it's almost everything.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, maybe I should have been clear about what I was thinking of. So I think what you were saying was more to the effect of, we're still, like you were saying before, we're still in this land of disagreement. It's going to take a long time for the fitness collective, however we define that, to come to more of a broad sense of agreement. I guess what I had in mind is I'm curious, where you are now with your set of beliefs with regard to fitness. Do you run into any of those situations kind of like I was describing in grad school among, fellow peers who, have been in the coaching industry for a long time, who you respect? Any fitness topics of disagreement where, you're like, you know what, that kind of made me rethink some of my views on things. I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's a whole lot of stuff that we think is not substantial within fitness disagreement. I'm wondering, are there any ones that you run into recently where like, oh, that made me rethink this, or this is a worthwhile topic of substantial, discussion and disagreement among even smart, rational people in fitness?
Yeah. I can't think of one.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't think of one, but the way you described, like, my peers, like others who stood the test of time and now are there, and what are we discussing? And as I mentioned before, we're not discussing anything because there's not a lot of us, and we're not connected. There's no group, there's no institutions that, of course, support mastery of coaching, and we're all arms around one another, right? To even have these conversations, we're all off in our own little silos doing what we can. So I can't even have a conversation with those individuals because, number one, I don't think a lot of them exist, if any at all. And number two, we're not connected any way, shape, or form. But if I was to like posit what I think we'd have maybe still some disagreements on, again, I don't think there'd be hardly anything. There'd be much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't need
I
to
think
be
it's
like
timely. I think it's timely. I think, for example, people that were my senior in like the late 90s as coaches had disagreement on topics that seemed to be important on the day, right? Like free weights versus machines, right? And people were like, are you kidding me? It was like, this was a hot topic, in the late 90s. Weight belts for the general population versus no belts, right? And this influx of scientific investigation of back pain and core control and internal code control cylinders, et cetera, motor control theory, et cetera. That was a very, heated debate. So I'm just saying that the culture and the time and what's important and where fitness fits in certainly does matter. And so in 2021, other 47-year-old coaches with 27 years experience, not disagreeing on much.
Okay. In terms of that distinction we were talking about earlier of like matters of taste versus objective facts, do you think there's something like that within fitness? Do you think there are certain things that are just like, I enjoy doing this and I enjoy doing that, and there's not really much to say about the disagreement, versus things that really are, no, this is an objective fact of the matter?
I'm not sure about the fact portion. You can maybe clear it up for me, but I think there's definitely what looks like disagreement, but we're all agreeing upon movement, right? Like people are moving, right? So let's take the example, individuals that want to do cycling every day for a couple hours, right? And then others who want to do yoga and swimming. And then others want to do, resistance, body weight stuff and hiking, right? And in my mind, I see them all as the same. And I also see the reason behind those people, why they would choose those things. And I talk a lot about that in CCP with the concept of max physical potential, and resources and et cetera, and longevity. So we're probably having a slight disagreement inside of that, but it's really, we're to your point going, yeah, we're talking a different language, but I'm good with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would say kind of the different strokes for different folks on the modalities of.
Yes. Okay. For sure. And I guess underpinning that is like, well, it depends upon the eye of what the dose response is for all of them. And that's where I see them all as just movement, but there are some disagreements inside of it. Yeah.
Are there any modalities that would not be different strokes for different folks?
Dynamic.
I feel like there would be, based on
dynamic, unexpressible contractions. Running generally will bump up, right? Running for people who can't express it will bump up against that. For that concept of what all those neo group coaches are describing as longevity, Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's interesting. Because I mean, obviously, a famous discussion within fitness that a lot of people take as a disagreement of objective matters of fact would be strength versus endurance, right?
Yeah.
So something to that effect. And what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that based on the activities you outlined, it's really just a different piece of the web, and it's all of the same thing. And what seems to be a disagreement about objective matters of fact is really not one. It's more about what someone prefers to do.
Yeah, for them based upon what they're capable of and their experience, right?
Okay.
So it just needs to get colored. That's just how I see it, So I don't see it as an either or. I see that as the wrong way of coming into it, So it's like, well, who are we talking about? That's the way I see it. So I guess it's not a disagreement. It needs to be colored.
Going back to a point you've made in previous episodes, is there any sense in which we would say to someone who chooses a resistance activity as their main mode of expression, or cycling as their main mode of expression, and they say that's the only thing I need?
Yeah.
Would we then disagree with them and say, well, cyclist, hey,
yeah,
let's do some push-ups? And
yes,
what are your thoughts on, and if we say that, okay, well then there are some, like, we're getting back into that matters of fact, like
yes.
Yes, okay,
yes, yeah. And so just to play out what I would say there, it's nothing more. I'm not going to drop a special term here, but it's education, right? It's taking the personalization interest in, because as a coach, you're going to say, well, this is what I believe to be a truth, is that there needs to be these balance of things, right? And so we can express these two things, and you can go as deep as you want into the natural, capable practice of real challenging contractions, right? And stuff that goes like this, right? And they're the clients like, yeah, I do a lot of this, right? And you're like, yeah, I'm not saying that's not enough or that's not worthy. I'm just saying that let's have this discussion on education around really hard things, right? And knee pain, let's discuss that. Oh, I heard, people have had heart attacks with hard contractions. Let's discuss that. I heard people hurt their backs with hard contractions. Let's discuss that. It takes a long time. So see what I just did there as a coach? I'm just offering, a more educated answer to, instead of just saying, well, listen, you just don't know and I know. And so this is what you need to do. You just like cycling. You think that's the only way, but you need to balance it out with some contractions. And this is why.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, going back to that point of like,
and that's why I mentioned, sorry, Robbie, just so I could play out what I mentioned earlier of max potential. For those who are not aware of that in CCP, I talk about why a whole bunch of people, that's why I use cycling, why a whole bunch of people choose cycling when they're 60 till they're 90, and the odd push-up and squat. And I still think that's higher order. Why? Because they did 35 years of really hard contractions. So now you can see it's like, well, what's the definition of resisting entropy and what needs to be the modality to maintain that? Do you see how that's colored differently than someone who had zero experience and thinks that cycling 2 hours a day is the answer? So that's what I meant by it has to be individualized based upon this concept of what have you strived towards, right? Have you done these years of those two bipolar pieces, right? Hard contractions, easy aerobic work, and played each of them out, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I mean, certainly there are some that have done both, but I think we both know plenty of people who, who are just like, they are in love with one modality and just haven't
Yeah.
even touched the other.
Yeah. Mhm.
But yeah, I think that's an important distinction to kind of clarify for people what we were, what you were saying there. So seeming disagreement within fitness that seems like it's an objective matter of fact to a lot of people. Strength versus endurance. No, not quite. You can have this web of different things that people are doing and different strokes for different folks, ... There's still an objective matter of fact about for health and longevity and, the achievement of max human potential, where we can't just say, well, you cycled for 30 years and never touched a dumbbell or a push-up. Like we're still pushing that in there. That's still objective matter of fact.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the consequences of disagreement in fitness? Do you think it's all harmful? Is any of it beneficial? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, yeah. So, well, this is what I say. I think we're at a point in time where coaches or whoever is a part of it as a coach inside of fitness can't only abide by the book. They can't do that. It's not enough now. It's not enough just to have the book and conviction and belief and have all the technical capabilities of invoking change in behaviors and actions in people. It is our burden now as coaches to also criticize bad ideas and have disagreements, whether it's in your tribe, in your public forum, for your own practice of getting better at disagreements. My opinion is that you need to jump outside of those that are just inside your chamber and have disagreements, kindly, the right way. Why? Because you're embarking on the steps to improve the systems and the collective. And if you don't do that as a coach from day one up until 35 years inside your business, right? Just because of the current times, we're all going to be swallowed and eaten up. So disagreement is currently, Robby, a very important part of the repertoire of a coach. Now, disagreement may sound like, this nefarious intention, right? Trolling, etc. No, I put it in the classification of consultation and conversation and communication. Right? So what happens inside of all those 3 C's? Possible disagreement. So it comes with very positive intentions, right? But why are you disagreeing with it, right? You could be saying, are you really going to spend all your time disagreeing with clients who just want to bike all the time? No, you're not. You're not. But what you're going to need to be able to do is to disagree with someone down the street who's on the megaphone saying that 60 seconds 3 times a week is the answer to all their woes, plus this home food delivery system. So you can't allow that to go on. We could have turned our back to that and just be like, don't worry, they're all going to show up at my place and we're all good, right? We can't do that anymore. So there has to be a part for disagreement in the coach's repertoire.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there are a couple of things I think of there. I mean, to kind of what you were saying, I think for most people, disagreement, that term, has kind of a pejorative connotation, negative idea behind it. And as we were discussing, there are a lot of harms that, can come from just constant bickering back and forth about seemingly unimportant things within fitness and confusing the general population. But it can also be beneficial. And what I find very interesting about your position is it's not just a virtue but almost a duty and almost a vice if you don't.
Yeah.
to disagree with these bad ideas. And the other thing I think of there is going back to Aristotle's point that we've referenced a number of times, where like everything admits of a vice of excess and a vice of deficiency. We can think of disagreement, on this. There's such a thing as proper disagreement, right? And there's a vice of excess and a vice of deficiency. Trolling being the vice of excess, where it's like wrong, no, just
Yeah.
smashing the button. But proper disagreement would be educated disagreement with good intentions, and trying to lead people to more of a objective truth side of things.
Yeah. And the medium has to be discussed there too, because I just think that, over the past 10 years, we've gotten very comfortable with what we perceive to be our mode of communication for disagreement. And that's why I'm older, I'm more traditional based upon that, and I'm biased to it. And I don't think I've meshed well with the new concept of relationships, if it's not obvious. and I think that I just really do believe that when I say those things, like, and I would say, Robby, maybe it's not criticizing bad ideas, maybe it's just criticizing other ideas. I should probably change my language on that, because you're presuming with bad ideas that they don't have any objective truth inside of what they're mentioning, right? That he immediately says you're not open to that. You're not even open to the concept of what they're saying, of the 60 seconds 3 times a week. But I would say that you need to do that boots on the ground, right? Like, we need to talk about the medium in which that occurs, right? And that has to be like conversation. Like, you need to like go and speak to that coach, right? Who's holding the megaphone on the thing, is like, listen, when you're done, can we chat for 10 minutes, because this is what I see to be true in the practice that I'm doing, right? And have you thought about these things, right? Like, what happens when, people adapt to 60 seconds 3 times a week? What do they do then? And then the laundry list of other questions you could ask them. Do you see that? But that can occur on Twitter. And we think it does. We think that's where the public square is for disagreement. And if fitness falls inside of that, I mean, we're dead in the water. It's gonna be more chaos for the public, right? When they stick their head up with like, who's saying some truths that I could like grasp onto and really fall in love with, right? They're just going to choose whatever, works well for them. And we know where that gets us. So
what you're saying is we need to go to Clubhouse instead of Twitter.
Pretty much. Gosh, even that is that's a scary proposition of the turning into something. But whatever the yeah. The in-person visceral communication is really important, and that's I tell coaches about that a lot, not just their clients, make yourself really strong, and then start teaching those around you, and then be ready, because you're going to have to do it. And the reason why you're going to have to do it and go speak to the person on the megaphone is that if you want to grow beyond just those around you in your ecosystem, right? And you want to help the system, like your whole business and in your community writ large, then you're going to have to start that. And then if you truly long-term are inspired, like I am at this point in time, of helping the collective and asking those big questions, you're going to have to know how to get into that public square, and have that disagreement.
Yeah. The space of reasons, and have reasons to back your stuff up and lob something over the net, and then someone else lobs something back. And
yes. Yes.
When I think about the to make the philosophy connection here, when I think about the history of philosophy, like some of the greatest philosophy comes out of Plato and Aristotle, like student and teacher, like tremendous disagreements, tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
Hume Kant, not student and teacher per se, but temporally similar thing, like tremendous disagreements. But there's a lot that comes out of that, and forward progression that comes out of thinking through someone else's ideas and thinking, well, is this right, is it not, what do we say about it? And so
yeah. And you just made me think about disagreement takes time as well, like for everyone to lay their facts out, that's a long time. Like I mentioned the Bill Craig and Christopher Hitchens. That's a 2-hour, 45-minute thing. You can't 2 times that and get the benefit of it. You got to watch it. You got to watch it for 2 hours, 45 minutes. And then after, like my notes, I mean, there's like an hour of notes, so
It's not a 15-second reel.
What's that?
It's not a 15-second Instagram reel.
No, it's not, right? It's not. So yeah, lots of challenges inside that, but hey, it's all right. It's a part of it. I keep thinking about, what would we all be doing if we didn't have disagreement as well? I think we'd be coming up with things like my mentors were in the 90s, right? Arguing in forums over, is it the transverse abdominis or multifidus? It's like, yeah, crazy. So
yeah, that's an interesting question about human nature. Is it such that just in principle, maybe from an evolutionary perspective or what have you, that we're just, there's too much agreement and there's just gonna, some set of people is gonna spring up to be like, nope. Or does that actually track the truth, right? Is that just some feature of humanity where like, we're going to disagree just for the sake of disagreement and it need not track the truth? Or is it when, there's only legit disagreement when it's tracking like what's objectively true? It's an interesting one. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then I guess last question I had for this one is, do you think that agreement in fitness has increased or decreased over time? And follow up to that, if it's decreased, what do you see as the inflection point that's going to get us to 2099? So yeah, those are the 2 questions.
Yeah. I think it has, you asked if disagreement has increased or decreased?
Correct.
Yeah. Disagreement has tremendously increased because of information, options, choices, who's right, who's wrong, what is fitness, how do we do this, etc. And I think it'll be stuff that's data that's not even inside of fitness that will get us to that change point. And I think it's unfortunate, but it's our current investigation in terms of what we consider general health and mental health and physical capabilities. And I think that over time, we will not be able to, like, we'll go through all the biohacking. We're in a biohacking phase, right? All the biohacking and all the telomere investigation, all the gene studies, right? 23andMe and all these things. And then over time, we're like, yeah, we got all this fucking data and we have all these apps and all this technology, and we're all really sick. Like, can't do basic day-to-day things, like even worse than, what I'm saying? So, and if that seems dystopic, well, just look at the data. We're not, as I said, we're not improving general health measures around the world, tremendously every month, right? And don't use factors of pulling 150,000 people out of poverty every day as that, So I think the obesity one, as a data point over time, as well as this resilience factor, which needs to be colored and stretched out in conversation, right? But I predict there'll be in like 20 years a whole bunch of different diseases that come from this intergenerational constant barrage of low resilience. And I think there'll be things that arise that to end it, Robbie, I think over time we'll go, geez, we really should have injected some real a more positive form of intentions around physical activity in nature, with an appreciation for that and an appreciation for the fact that it makes all of us stronger, not for reasons to ward off these diseases, but so I think that'll happen. And I'm not saying that then all of a sudden it'll be like the skies will open up and things will be different. I think it'll actually be possibly worse, but that might be a change.
Might be the start of things heading.
The start.
Yeah.
The start where something, and that's why I always keep laughing about it, because I really do think that it may take some form of like, shift in, I'm just going to use the word coercion, power, and force to embed this in everyone over time, right? That's why I get funny smiles with like the horn and everyone doing physical activity it's just like, we'll have to embed it in people, force everyone to do it. Maybe 40 years later, we're all like, oh, geez, aren't we so grateful that we kind of forced that upon all of us, right? To just do physical challenges every day, to be a part of society like breakfast, and to give everyone their right to physical freedom, because we've just been, because we're not free in that, or I should say we're not aware of that freedom. That's it.
We are free to not be aware of that freedom.
Yes, we are. Very meta.
Oh man, any final thoughts there on disagreement?
No, I think we covered I think where we could go, or if we decide to, or is actually like just do an entire podcast on the actual disagreements. Like, what are the actual disagreements? And what is the one side, what is the other, where does this occur, and not hold any judgment on either, but just be like, and not go into, well, how do we come up with what those truths are inside those, like I generally like to do. I think that's either a part 2 or a future piece, but I think we did a good job of just where disagreement ties in from philosophy and its understanding. I think you gave a couple of great points that I learned from of where my faults are and why I take positions in certain area and why I believe what I do. And I think that's going to be helpful to others as well. So I think we did a good job of that.
Yeah. And I learned a lot too. And I think, I mean, just even the notion of, that's such an interesting notion. The idea of disagreement, at least today, being a virtue, something you've got to go and strike out and do as a fitness coach or a health coach. It's, a very interesting notion, because like you said, most people think of disagreement as not the polite thing to do, or only do it if you're forced to. But even the idea of like not just doing it if you're faced with something you disagree with, but actively going out and calling these things out.
And we could play that one out, because there's also like a stepwise sequence to that too, right? You don't just start disagreeing from day one as a coach, right? What I believe in is coaches need to spend a lot of time on working on themselves for a couple of years, right? And then you can, be a part of this conversation, right? Where you're like sitting in the crowd watching the disagreement, and you're just like, okay, interesting, like I did, right? Oh, weight belts, no weight belts. That was interesting, and then you start teaching your people, right? Those around you, and you're affecting the couple of years. Then after that, now you're putting your hand up, right? So someone's up there speaking, and you're like, just a second, right? I got this idea based upon what people should have with their intentions of exercise. So how do you answer that? So what you just did there was disagreement with their notion that 60 seconds is going to fix everything. So there's a timeline sequence to that, to what what you just mentioned that you found interesting with the virtue. So I'm going to quickly think about that. I have a list there that's awareness, attentiveness, and authenticity, and trust, and empathy, and vulnerability, as those like coach attributes. And I think disagreement comes on the back end of those. They're going to happen with that, as I mentioned, the consultation, communication, conversation process.
Attack would help with alliteration, but would not be the right not the right way. We don't want to make it Cobra Kai. Strike hard,
make people sit up and listen.
Yeah.
Well, I think he said attack.
Cobra Kai, strike first, strike fast, no mercy.
I haven't started it or watched it whatsoever, but guess what? Hannah was not a part of the former story, which I was, and she loves it. My daughter loves that. and is telling me shows all the time, Dad, Danny, and the history. I was like, yeah, exactly. Remember this what happened? Mr. Miyagi is. I was like, yeah, exactly. So it's a pretty cool like generational connection there.
It's a great show, and B, I mean, from what I've read, that's precisely why it's done so well. Is like they did a great job for like, this generation, but also for like, people who actually saw the original Karate Kid.
Yeah, yeah. See, then there is the benefit of this new media, right? Like, for example, my daughters are interested in Friends, and now they have a HBO special coming out on them reuniting, and my daughters are interested in seeing it.
Yeah.
Right. So think about that. I mean, that was my like Thursday night,
Yeah.
So pretty cool the way that's connected. And we have no disagreement on that one. Let me tell you. There's agreement in our household. How you doing? They both know how to do that really well. Yeah.
You were saying before that one of your nightmares is the way people would survive the zombie attack would be being really good at OPEX pain. I joked with Brandon a while back that one of my quasi dreams, which is obviously not going to come to pass, would have been you sitting there with me at my level 2 and just like actively like, because even back, I mean, it was
slow hand raise every time as they start the conversation, right?
And I mean, that was that was a while ago now for me, and even then, like, if you're not doing the same programming your clients are doing, I mean, or just if it's not out of the hopper, I mean, just really like what but yeah. So anyway,
yeah.
I thought
no nightmares to that one. Although I would like to see that. I would like to see that meme come to life where somehow that's set up. 2090 situation. Zombies are like so glycolytic, and I'm in this room like John Nash with shit on the walls, aerobic and strength, and all these paperwork, and I'm just like burning place down. Like an old guy showing this massive life's work frustration, right?
It was supposed to be gain plus sustain, and then it's like pain. It's like, God damn it.
Oh, good stuff. All right, my man. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, agreed on lots. We agreed to disagree.
Yep.
We disagreed about some forms of disagreement. We also agreed about some forms of disagreement. Did we disagree to disagree?
And therefore agree?
Perhaps.
And for those who made it this far into the episode, thank you for listening. This is officially going to conclude our official season 1, which
yes,
I've had a lot of fun with. So.
Da, 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 da. Do you think we should play a song to like get us into higher levels of illegal notoriety?
We can. It'll be turned into music by
All right.
But it'll be, Curb Your Enthusiasm. That's what's gonna play instead.
I'll leave it for your editing skills. Oh yes.
It's all folly, and then that's what it plays.
Touche. I'm not even gonna play it. I'm gonna go listen to that now for a workout. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks so much.
See you.